Sotheby's has been enormously privileged to hold the sales of so many great libraries over the last 250 plus years. This is a great collection. This is a great story.
The material in this collection is just of overwhelming significance.
This library really is a love letter to America. This is James Copley, the creator of this extraordinary collection. He was born in 1916. 2 years later, in 1918, both his parents died. And 2 years later, when he was 4 years old, he was adopted by Colonel Copley, a newspaper and utilities magnate, and suddenly became part of an extraordinary family. James Copley was a great patriot. He was tapped by President Nixon, in fact, to be the media chairman of the Bicentennial Commission.
And inspired by the Bicentennial, he started to collect manuscripts particularly relating to the American Revolution.
This is a man who didn't collect this library until 1966, and unfortunately was dead by 1973. The idea that somebody could have done it so quickly indicates just a level of passion and commitment which is amazing. He was absolutely inspired by the story of America.
Patriots have always wanted to preserve, I think, the history of the country.
He was particularly interested in the real people behind the story of America.
John Paul Jones, Paul Revere,
Thomas Jefferson,
Lafayette,
George Washington or John Adams.
Anyone you can think of associated with America becoming an independent country.
The great writers, the great scientists.
Emily Dickinson.
Mark Twain, composers like George Gershwin.
The list just goes on and who's who.
They're all represented in this library. This is a really big collection. It's not being sold in simply one sale. There are 8 sales. Over to the left here is a chair in which Lincoln sat, and in which he's thought to have heard that he'd won the presidency. Through a period of 15 months, there'll be 4 sales with large collections of material, and then there'll be 4 specific single lot sales.
Well, it's hard, especially in today's world of email and Blackberries, to think of how much people depended on letter writing in the past.
I mean, this is really important. This is George Washington's own commendation for Anthony Wayne for a victory in one of the great battles of the Revolution, the Battle of Stony Point. We think it's going to create a lot of excitement.
6. It is signed by Button Gwinnett, the rarest of all 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence.
Our famous Button Gwinnett. Do you know who Button Gwinnett is?
He's little known, but well known among collectors. No one quite knows why he's so scarce, although he was killed in a duel less than a year after signing the Declaration of Independence. Mr. Copley obtained the best Button Gwinnett signature that a private collector could have. This is the most important document that an American collector could have.
The Declaration of Independence is such a wonderfully emotional object.
It's one thing to read the Declaration of Independence in a textbook, but when you realize that people in July 1776 read this very piece of paper that we're looking at now, you can really see yourself transformed back to a town square and learning, well, we finally did it. The Declaration of Independence we now, of course, revere as a great document, but these early printings weren't seen that way. They were seen as news bulletins. They were a way of getting the news out. This particular broadside was printed in Salem, Massachusetts by Ezekiel Russell.
To sell the Salem Declaration is a great privilege.
Well, the cornerstone of the collection, I think, for the arts and sciences would be the Samuel Clemens or Mark Twain collection. No one can be as quintessentially iconic as Mark Twain. He was an entrepreneur, he was a miner, he was a riverboat pilot. He led a very, very colorful life. In his early days, he was rough and ready, womanizing, boozing. It wasn't until he actually met the love of his life that he reformed his evil ways. He had 3 daughters, and he adored every one of them. There are at least 150 autographed letters, and there's a string that runs through a narrative, actually. So we have the letter in which he's giving his character references to his future father-in-law. Then he's writing to his sister and saying, you know, don't breathe a word of this yet, but I am determined that I am going to marry Livy Langdon. And then all the letters that he wrote to his children. Most of what he wrote was published, but in fact we do have an unpublished manuscript called A Family Sketch. It's very autobiographical in nature. He started it as a memorial to his daughter Susie, who passed away at the age of 24. It's heavily annotated and corrected. They were all there. They came in a moment and they were gone as quickly. Her approval was passionate, her disapproval the same, and they were prompt. Her affections were strong, and towards some her love was of the nature of worship. Many people collect manuscripts and letters, but nothing of this sort of caliber in terms of its intimacy and in terms of its importance.
In October, we'll be selling an archive belonging to Henry Strachey, who was the secretary to the Howe brothers when they were sent to the United States by George III. By the time they arrived, the United States were in open rebellion, and they, instead of peace commissioners, became the commanders-in-chief of the British. Strachey combines official documents with personal documents that he wrote to his wife and friends, which give an entirely different perspective on what was going on. I begin to think it possible that a whole country, as well as an individual, may be struck with lunacy. He has very little patience for the Americans. He describes them as diseased, and he expects the war will be over in a matter of months. The Americans proved a little more formidable than he and his bosses thought. Well, next April, we'll be selling 2 notebooks kept by John Lansing at the Constitutional Convention. John Lansing was one of the delegates who went to the Constitution representing New York. The convention was held in complete secrecy. Delegates were allowed to take notes, but not even to take the notes out of Independence Hall. Here's the first entry from May 25th, 1787. So Lansing's 2 documents really give us a behind-the-scenes look at how our Constitution was debated and drafted.
We're surrounded by the most remarkable figures of American history. And it's a remarkable achievement.
Manuscripts are particularly interesting because they're by definition unique. And when you have a unique manuscript that also has great content, that's what gets collectors really excited. And this collection is full of them.
To have this extraordinary library come to us is not only a privilege, but it's a major responsibility. We're going to do a really good job with this.